Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Clint Maddox bought a crumbling house on a quiet Oregon hill, he expected peace. Instead, he found drones, surveillance, sabotage, and a war with the most powerful HOA in the state. What began as a renovation turned into a battle for freedom. When I first pulled up the cracked, overgrown driveway to that old 1920s hilltop house, I felt something I hadn't in years. Quiet pride. Not relief, not anxiety, not even excitement. Just a calm, grounded pride. 3 acres of mossy Oregon hillside, a house older than my grandfather with a sagging wraparound porch and half the roof caved in. But it was mine. I'd spent the last 15 years restoring homes other people had given up on. This one was going to be different. This one was for me. It took 2 weeks to move in. I kept my mattress on the floor upstairs, tools under the stairs, and a percolator plugged into a portable generator. The city's power hookup hadn't been updated since Eisenhower, so it'd be a bit before I got a real connection. But I didn't mind. Solitude suited me. No HOA. No neighbors breathing down my neck about paint swatches or where I park my truck. Just wind, crows, and the creaking bones of a house that still had stories to tell. The property backed into forest on 2 sides, but down the slope to the south sat Cedar Crest, a pristine HOA-ruled neighborhood where lawns were clipped with military precision and mailboxes matched like clone soldiers. They weren't on my land, and I wasn't on theirs. Or so I thought. The first time I noticed the white Mazda, it didn't even register. It was parked just beyond the bend where my drive met the county road, half shadowed by trees. Tinted windows, clean rims, and a bumper sticker that said something smug about security being sexy. I figured maybe a hiker or birdwatcher. The second time I noticed it, it was parked in the exact same spot. Same time, early morning, just after sunrise. I gave a little wave. No response. By the 4th morning, it was like a metronome. Mazda arrives, parks, idles for 20 minutes, leaves. I'm not paranoid by nature, but I've been in enough small-town construction disputes to recognize a pattern when I see one. I walked over one morning, coffee in hand, just to get a look. As soon as I stepped off my drive, the car started and pulled away. Fast. I got a good look at the license plate, though. Oregon tags, Cedar Crest registration sticker in the corner. Then came the drone. I was tightening beams on the upstairs landing one evening, sun just dipping low, and I heard a high-pitched whine outside the window. At first, I thought it was a wasp or one of those cursed deer flies, but it didn't go away. I stepped out onto the porch, and there it was, small, black, humming like a mosquito in heat, just hovering 20 feet up, right over my backyard. I stared at it. It stared back, or at least, that's how it felt. It hovered for about 30 seconds, then zipped off fast and deliberate toward Cedar Crest. That would have been creepy enough once, but it came back the next night. Same time, same spot, every evening at 7 o'clock sharp. I called the sheriff's office. They sent out Deputy Hughes, who looked like a teenager wearing his dad's badge. I explained the situation, the car, the drone, the strange consistency. He took notes, then said, "Well, technically, the drone's not violating anything. It's flying in public airspace. As long as it's not armed and it's not landing on your property, there's not a whole lot we can do." "Not armed?" I asked. He shrugged. "It happens. Anyway, the Mazda's parked on County Road. Legal. So someone can just stake out my house every day, and that's fine. As long as they don't trespass, yeah, you could try civil court, I guess." Helpful. Thanks, Hughes. It got worse. A shipment of reclaimed pine beams I'd been waiting on disappeared overnight. The delivery company swore they'd drop them at the right spot, right at the mouth of the driveway, per my instructions. I found tire tracks in the gravel and some deep ruts leading off into the trees, but no wood, no splinters, nothing. A few days later, 2 men in city-issued windbreakers showed up, clipboards in hand, claiming to be compliance inspectors from the Department of Urban Maintenance and Structure. I'd never heard of that department. They wouldn't show me ID. They wouldn't give names. They poked around the side of the house, took notes, asked about septic alignment and setback compliance. "Who sent you?" I asked. They exchanged glances. "We respond to anonymous complaints," one of them said. "I'm outside city limits," I said flatly. They didn't care. They left without answering more questions. I ran into one of the Cedar Crest residents at the grocery store, a nervous guy in a button-down and cargo shorts who recognized me from a neighborhood barbecue I had no memory of attending. I heard your place is getting renovated, he said. Yeah, slowly but surely. He looked uncomfortable. Some people in the neighborhood were saying, just rumors, I'm sure, but that there's weird activity up there. Vans, night work, strange noises. Construction is weird, I said. We hammer things. He laughed awkwardly and made an excuse to leave. That night, the drone returned. Closer this time. It hovered over my back deck, barely 10 feet from my window. I stepped outside and threw a hammer at it. Missed, of course. The thing zipped off into the dusk like a roach under a light. I reported it again. Same deputy. Same answer. No violation. They weren't touching it. At this point, the Mazda was basically part of the landscape. I tried approaching it again, but it always peeled away the moment I stepped off my property. Then came the whispers. Literal whispers. I walked into a hardware store and heard someone mutter behind me. That's him, from the place up the hill. Creepy house guy. One of my subcontractors texted me late one night to say he wouldn't be coming back. Said he didn't want to get involved. No explanation. This was no longer coincidence. This was pressure. And it was organized. But I didn't know yet just how deep it went. They say a house settles as it adjusts to new occupants. Creaks in the night, walls groaning against the wind. But what my house was doing wasn't settling. It was reacting, as though it could feel the eyes watching us. One morning, about 3 or 4 weeks after move-in, a city inspection truck rumbled up my drive. Not the generic windbreaker guys from before. This was official. Logo, permit badge, the whole uniform. A tall inspector named Bradley stepped out, adjusting his glasses like he was preparing to tell me a loved one had died. We received a formal complaint, he said. Allegedly unauthorized commercial construction on residential property. I blinked at him. This is not a residential property. It's zoned as a historical restoration project. And I have every damn permit I need. Bradley spent an hour reviewing paperwork, inspecting beams, tapping his pen against a clipboard. Then he sighed and said, "Everything appears to be in order. Sorry to waste your time." He left looking annoyed, though not with me. The next week, a letter arrived from the IRS, a formal inquiry. I had allegedly failed to disclose income from unlicensed short-term tenancies. Basically, someone told them I was secretly running a hotel for construction workers. Cute. It didn't end there. Another letter, this time from the County Historical Preservation Commission, claiming I was modifying a protected building without proper authorization, even though my permits were literally signed by one of their commissioners. In case you've never dealt with bureaucratic snowballing, let me translate. Every hour I wasn't swinging a hammer, I was drowning in paperwork and phone calls. And every new accusation slowed the project just a little more. Delays are expensive. That's the whole strategy. The gossip spread even faster. On a supply run, a barista asked if I was the guy with all the mysterious deliveries on the hill. I heard neighbors whispering in the paint aisle at the hardware store, something about strange comings and goings, like I was harboring fugitives instead of lumber. One afternoon, a large man in a suit knocked on my half-finished front porch. He looked like the type who thought intimidation counted as cardio. "I represent Cedar Crest Homeowners Association," he said, handing me a glossy brochure like it was a subpoena. "We'd like to discuss concerns regarding your property's impact on neighborhood appeal." I laughed. Married to the HOA president, laughter. "I'm not in your neighborhood. I'm not in your HOA. I'm not in your jurisdiction." He didn't laugh back. "We maintain strict aesthetic continuity for property values. The state of your house is generating complaints. We can help you come into compliance." "Oh, that is precious," I said, leaning against a post that creaked in solidarity. "Do you see a single foot of Cedar Crest land here?" "No." "Then take your brochure and—" He cut me off. Mrs. Dorrigan would prefer to avoid unnecessary escalation. There it was, the name, the face behind the Mazda, the droid overlord of perfectly manicured tyranny, Karen Dorrigan. I stepped forward, close enough to smell his cheap cologne. "Tell Karen to stop sending stooges. I'm not joining her cult." He left with a look that said I had just personally offended a very powerful haircut. That evening, I found a flyer nailed to one of my fence posts. Actual hammer and nail, old-school vigilante HOA justice. The flyer accused me of operating an unlicensed business, endangering community safety, and, my personal favorite, reducing visual harmony. Visual harmony. Like I was a discordant tuba in their suburban orchestra. I scribbled a smiley face on the flyer and left it on the road. If they wanted a response, they could tape it to their Range Rovers and cry about it during Pilates. But despite my bravado, the truth slipped in at night. Someone was orchestrating all of this with immaculate coordination. 1 complaint, an annoyance. 5, a campaign. And remember the Mazda. It wasn't just mornings anymore. It was evenings too, engine off, but headlights reflecting faintly off the trees like a predator's eyes. My phone buzzed one night. A voicemail. No number. A woman's voice. Clipped, rehearsed, dripping with superiority. Mr. Maddox, you're disrupting the integrity of Cedar Crest's community experience. You will comply with our corrective process, or we will pursue further action. We expect your cooperation. No introduction, no explanation, no name needed. I played the message back 3 times, analyzing every breath. Then I deleted it and stood on my porch for a long time listening to the woods. The drone didn't come that night, but somehow that felt worse, because silence can be a threat too. I knew I had a choice. Sit back and let the slow bleed continue, or do what I've done my whole life. Grab the damn tools and build my own way out. So I started with cameras. Not the little live laugh, lockdown, smart cams suburbanites slap on their porches. I installed real gear, infrared, night vision, facial recognition, wide-angle lenses mounted discreetly across the tree line, the porch gables, and the barn roof. My property may not have had internet yet, but I'd wired enough houses to run a private network using solar and batteries. Everything funneled to a laptop I kept locked inside a metal box beneath the floorboards. The first few nights, nothing. Except owls. One of them seemed personally offended by the camera on his favorite perch and took to dive bombing it every evening at dusk. Then, on the 6th night, at exactly 7 p.m., the drone returned. This time, I had an eye on it. Camera 3 caught it approaching low over the tree line, hovering directly above my bedroom window, less than 10 feet from the glass. The resolution was good enough to catch the serial number on its underside. Better yet, the heat sensor showed it had been running for at least 20 minutes before it entered my airspace, meaning someone had been watching, waiting. 3 nights later, I caught her. Camera 1, mounted on an old water tower stump by the north fence line, pinged an alert at 2 a.m. I checked the feed, and there she was, Karen Dorrigan in a quilted vest and yoga pants, standing at the edge of my property line with a tablet in hand, eyes locked on the screen, her face aglow with that sickly LED light. The drone hovered just overhead, responding to her every move. Her body language was precise, too practiced for curiosity. She wasn't wandering. She was working. I took a still shot and saved it under the file name, Queen Bee. A week later, my patience paid off again. Camera 5, the one watching the tool shed, picked up motion at 3:30 in the morning. A man in a gray hoodie crept up, flashlight off, and pried open a side panel with a screwdriver. He grabbed a box of sealed copper wiring, worth maybe $600 retail, and made for the tree line. As he disappeared from the infrared zone, Camera 7 picked him up again, unloading the box into the trunk of that same white Mazda. The license plate matched the one from my notebook. Now I had faces, motions, plates, times, patterns, but I needed connections. I called in a favor from a man I hadn't spoken to in 5 years, Ray Burden, a former cop turned private investigator with a neck like a tire jack and a brain wired for patterns. Ray owed me for saving his cabin project when a storm wiped out half the foundation. I told him I needed someone who could dig through HOA records, shell companies, and city contracts without leaving digital footprints. Ray didn't ask for details. He just said, "Give me 72 hours. He called back in 48. "You ever hear of a company called Parallax Security LLC?" he asked. Sounds like a Bond villain startup. Well, they've received over $200,000 in the past year from the Cedar Crest HOA budget for community surveillance, infrastructure safety, and threat monitoring. "Let me guess," I said. "They don't have an office." "Correct. Registered out of a P.O. box in Portland. No website, no employees listed, but the name on the incorporation is John K. Levinson." "Any relation?" Ray chuckled. "He's Karen Dorrigan's second cousin. He did 18 months for wire fraud in Nevada 10 years ago." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the grainy freeze frame of Karen controlling her drone from my fence line. "She's skimming," I muttered. Ray continued. "It gets better. Some of those HOA payments are co-funded by city grants, public safety subsidies. I tracked approvals through a guy named Gordon Whitaker. He's the deputy director of public maintenance. Half of those grants got rubber stamped without a single oversight hearing. So she's not just stalking me, she's using public money to do it. Bingo! This was no longer a nosy neighbor with too much time and a control complex. This was coordinated embezzlement, enabled by a city official and masked behind HOA bureaucracy. It explained everything. Why no one took my complaints seriously, why every inspection was preloaded with suspicion, why the drone wasn't just curiosity, but precision surveillance. I printed out every photo, every license plate match, every grant summary Ray had dug up. I built a corkboard wall like some deranged detective, pinning threads from Karen to Parallax to Whitaker and back again. But I was still missing one thing. Someone inside the HOA. Someone who could get me the final piece of the puzzle. I didn't have to wait long. That weekend, while I was replacing shingles on the back slope, a man in his 60s wandered up the drive. Cargo vest, clipboard, wireframe glasses, like a census taker or a retired geography teacher. "You Clint Maddox?" he asked. "Depends on who's asking." He gave a sheepish smile. "Name's Paul Miller. I live in Cedar Crest. I'm on the HOA Finance Committee." Or, I was. I put down my hammer. "I want to talk," he said, voice low. "You're not crazy. She is. And I've got records." Paul Miller didn't look like the kind of guy who'd help bring down an empire. He looked like the kind of guy who alphabetized his garden hose attachments. But when he sat down at my workbench and opened that battered accordion folder, he might as well have detonated a bomb. "She's been bleeding us dry for years," he said. But nobody asked questions because Karen speaks in 3 languages: confidence, consequences, and cupcakes. Inside the folder were minutes from HOA meetings that never happened, invoices from Parallax Security LLC, dozens of them, with vague line items like community watch optimization and perimeter response maintenance. Most chilling of all were the copies of budget approval memos. They had forged votes, all showing unanimous board agreement, even when some of those board members were out of state, hospitalized, or in one case, dead. "Half the board doesn't even read what she gives us," Paul muttered. "She hands us pre-written motions. Nobody questions her. You speak up, and suddenly you're out of the loop. Or you get fined for some obscure violation." "Let me guess," I said. "Like your mailbox being 2 inches too tall." Paul gave a grim smile. "That was me, actually." Together with Ray, we cross-referenced every payment made to Parallax with grant dispersals from the city. What emerged was a perfect 3-step cycle. Karen inflates a neighborhood concern: crime, trespassing, vagrants, usually fictional or exaggerated. She applies for municipal security grants through Gordon Whitaker's department, citing those concerns and the HOA's response plan. Once the funds are approved, Parallax bills the HOA, on paper, for security upgrades, while Karen and her cousin funnel the money into private accounts. Ray traced the transfers. It was all there. Multiple shell companies, layered bank accounts in Delaware and British Columbia, even a one-time wire transfer to a consulting firm in the Cayman Islands. Classic. "She's good," Ray said, tapping his pencil. "Not careful, but good." Meanwhile, Karen was escalating. My mailbox, yes, my mailbox, the same one I installed myself, was smashed in with a baseball bat. My generator fuel line was mysteriously sliced. The drone now hovered lower, sometimes flashing its red light like it wanted me to know it was watching. One of my workers called me in a panic after getting stopped by 2 men claiming to be with county infrastructure oversight, asking why he was on a private property flagged for security concern status. Ray's voice over the phone was deadpan. She spooked, but Paul had saved the best for last. A single flash drive, password protected, labeled with Karen's favorite phrase, community harmony protocols. He said he didn't know what was on it. Karen had handed it to him once for printing, but he cloned it first out of instinct. We cracked the password in under 10 minutes. It was Karen 2020. Inside were dozens of documents, including one titled Surveillance Reports Maddox Project. The file was a running log. Dates, times, drone footage screenshots, notes like, Maddox moving materials again after dark, possible unlicensed labor. Contractor truck seen entering property without permit. Follow up GW. Send inspectors again next week. Notify city contacts. She had named me as a security threat in grant applications. There was even an embedded spreadsheet called HOA Tactical Forecast that listed projected expenses for monitoring operations, including fuel reimbursements for the Mazda. And then we saw the name, GW, approved December 3rd, Gordon Whitaker. That was it. We had hard proof linking Karen's HOA scam to a city official abusing his position to funnel public money into private fraud. This wasn't just an overzealous neighbor. This was organized white-collar crime. I knew what had to be done. I called a friend who worked at the county courthouse. Not a lawyer, but close enough. I asked what kind of case this would fall under. He said, depends. If it's private funds, it's civil fraud. If it's grant money, that's federal. Music to my ears. We compiled everything: video clips, logs, bank statements, copies of the HOA's forged minutes, the surveillance file, the parallax paper trail, and Gordon Whitaker's electronic signatures on funding approvals. Ray packaged it into a clean, concise dossier and added a cover page titled Oregon v. Dorrigan et al. Prepared evidence summary. We sent it to the district attorney's office, not through some online tip line, but directly to a contact of Ray's who'd worked white-collar cases in Salem. We didn't wait. We drove it over in person. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't even pretend to try. Instead, I sat on the front porch with my thermos of black coffee and a loaded USB drive in my pocket, watching the trees, daring that drone to show up again. It didn't, but I knew she would. The day I filed the complaint, the clouds over the Willamette Valley broke open like a bad omen. Rain lashed sideways, turning my drive into a creek bed. Fitting, I thought. This whole damn thing had been building like a storm. Might as well get wet. Ray insisted we hand-deliver the file to the district attorney's office in Salem. No email, no courier, no loose ends. The clerk at reception looked at the evidence packet like it was radioactive. I asked for a receipt. She gave me a nod like, this is about to be someone else's very big problem. We didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, I got a call from a man named Eric Talley, assistant district attorney for Marion County. Voice like gravel and no time for small talk. We've reviewed your materials, he said. It's substantial. You'll be hearing from us. Click. By the end of the week, the walls started closing in. For her this time. The Cedar Crest HOA building, a polished, smug little ranch office with security cameras and faux colonial shutters, was raided on a Wednesday morning. 3 unmarked cars, county records officers, and a federal observer from the Office of Inspector General. Karen wasn't in, of course. She was out on HOA business, which apparently meant sipping chai lattes and giving her yoga instructor hell about room temperature. By noon, the news hit. Local HOA president under criminal investigation for misuse of city grants. Karen didn't respond publicly. Not at first. But she didn't need to. Her attack dogs did the barking for her. I started getting letters. Legal-looking ones. One accused me of defamation. Another of property intimidation. She was trying to flip the narrative. Claim I had been harassing her. The cherry on top? A cease and desist order for unauthorized surveillance of neighborhood citizens. I called my lawyer, well, Ray's lawyer, a pit bull in horn rims named Marcy Beltran. She laughed for a full 30 seconds after reading it. Tell her to file it, she said. I'd love discovery. But we didn't stop there. Ray suggested we go nuclear, file a civil suit in parallel with the criminal case, one that hit Karen personally and also named the HOA and the city of Salem. Charges: defamation, harassment, fraudulent use of public funds, and personal damages. Marcy filed it within 48 hours. And then we hit the public with it. A friend of mine ran a local news blog, small time but sharp and honest. We gave them everything. Redacted documents, screenshots from the drone logs, even a full summary of Gordon Whitaker's involvement. The blog published a 3-part series titled Eyes in the Sky, How an HOA Turned Public Money into Private Power. It went viral in the most Oregon way, shared by homeowners on Reddit, retweeted by city council watchdogs, even featured in a Portland morning show under the tagline, When HOAs Attack. And just like that, Karen lost control of the story. People started talking. Former HOA board members came forward. A single mom posted anonymously about how she was fined over $2,000 by Cedar Crest for planting unauthorized native species in her garden. Another neighbor claimed Karen threatened to increase his dues if he didn't support a vote on expanding surveillance. But the final nail: Paul. He agreed to testify publicly. He stood on the steps of the Marion County Courthouse in his best department store suit, trembling but determined, and gave a short press statement. "This is not just about one man being harassed," he said. "This is about a system being hijacked by a few to control the many. And I was part of it. I won't be silent anymore." Karen finally cracked. At the next HOA meeting, held over Zoom because apparently she wasn't comfortable facing the community in person, she screamed at Paul, called him a traitor, accused me of hacking her files, and threatened to sue the entire board. It was glorious. She slammed her laptop shut. The screen froze on her angry grimace for a full 10 seconds before it disconnected. I made it my desktop background. 2 days later, Gordon Whitaker resigned from his city post. Personal reasons? Sure. The district attorney confirmed formal charges were being prepared: fraud, misuse of municipal funds, falsification of records, conspiracy to defraud the city, and violation of Oregon's public trust statutes. They were even considering federal wire fraud. We got a subpoena. I would testify. Ray smiled when I told him. "You ready to burn it down?" he asked. "No," I said. "I'm ready to rebuild." There's a kind of silence that only exists inside a courthouse. It's not peaceful. It's the hum of pressure, of deadlines, of people trying to control the outcome of their entire lives with just a few words. That's the kind of silence I walked into the morning of the preliminary hearing. The courtroom was packed. Locals, reporters, even a couple HOA members who'd resigned for health reasons, but suddenly looked very healthy sitting behind Karen in silent, anxious rows. On my side, Paul, Ray. My lawyer, Marcy, loaded for war in a power suit and leopard print heels that somehow made her look taller than the judge. We weren't just here to win. We were here to bury an empire. Karen Dorrigan walked in like she still owned the place. Hair perfect, suit tailored, eyes scanning the room like she was the one doing the favor just by showing up. Gordon Whitaker came in a separate door, looking like a man who hadn't slept in a month, probably because he hadn't. The DA was ready to file federal charges against him if he didn't flip. And, spoiler, he flipped hard. First up were the criminal charges: fraud, abuse of public funds, creation of shell companies for personal enrichment, unauthorized surveillance, harassment, falsification of legal records, 5 separate felony counts for Karen and 2 for Whitaker. The prosecution didn't just bring receipts, they brought a damn filing cabinet. The jury watched 2 hours of video. Karen near my fence line at night with the drone tablet. The drone hovering feet from my bedroom window. Her Mazda parked in the same spot every morning. Engine off, windows tinted. Footage of the contractor, her inspector, loading my wiring into her trunk. Screenshots from the Maddox project file. The spreadsheet labeled Threat Mitigation Forecast. The prosecution laid it out like a novel. Karen and Gordon orchestrated a scheme to manipulate HOA policy, inflate fake neighborhood safety issues, apply for grant money, then channel those funds through a fake security company registered to Karen's cousin, pocketing tens of thousands in the process. All while running a parallel harassment campaign to push me off my land. Marcy whispered during the slideshow, "They're doing my job for me." Then came the witnesses. Paul Miller testified first. Calm, clear, devastating. He walked the jury through fake budget votes, pressured approvals, and Karen's private instructions to ensure compliance through noise and nuisance strategy. The courtroom actually gasped. Next, Ray explained the financial trail, how he tracked the money through LLCs and bank accounts to offshore transfers. He made it look simple, like following breadcrumbs through a forest. Then came my crew, 2 workers describing how they were intimidated by fake inspectors. One nearly assaulted by a man claiming to be a HOA enforcer. A neighbor who admitted Karen threatened them with fines for not siding against me. And then, me. I took the stand. I spoke about the white Mazda, the drone, the missing materials, the harassment, the fake inspections, the isolation. I told the jury I came here to restore a house, not wage war. But when you're pushed hard enough, when the system works against you, you either roll over or you fight. Karen's defense tried everything. Claimed the drone was a personal hobby, that her cousin's company was legitimate, that I had exaggerated events for sympathy, and that I harbored a vendetta against her position as a community leader. Then Marcy stood up with the flash drive. "Mrs. Dorrigan," she said sweetly, "can you explain why you created a digital document labeled Maddox Surveillance Timeline with line items for drone flight routes, inspector visits, and pressure application schedule? Karen's face twisted like she'd just swallowed a lemon. Soaked in regret, the judge ordered a recess. Her lawyer begged for a deal before the next session started. By week's end, the verdict was in. Karen Dorrigan, guilty on 4 felony counts, including financial fraud, criminal conspiracy, and illegal surveillance. Sentenced to 11 years in state prison with no parole for the first 6. Ordered to pay $175,000 in fines, plus full asset forfeiture of her home, car, and accounts used in the fraud. Gordon Whitaker pleaded guilty to 2 felony counts, sentenced to 7 years with 3 suspended for cooperation, banned from holding public office or city employment for life. And then came my part. The jury awarded me $320,000 in compensatory and punitive damages in the civil case, defamation, emotional distress, and property loss. The judge ruled that the Cedar Crest HOA acted with malicious intent and coordinated abuse of civil process, and ordered the HOA to dissolve operations within 90 days. As we walked out of the courthouse, Paul put a hand on my shoulder. "You didn't just save your house," he said. "You burned down their kingdom." Victory doesn't feel the way movies sell it. There's no euphoric music, no slow-motion hug. There's paperwork, court transcripts, frozen accounts, and signatures in blue ink. It felt less like winning and more like crawling out of a collapsed mine shaft, covered in dust, and still wondering if the roof might cave in again. But damn, the air was clean. I got the wire transfer 2 weeks after the verdict, $320,000. When it hit my account, I stared at the screen like it might vanish. Then I did something uncharacteristic. I shut my laptop, went out onto the porch, and just sat. No tools, no emails, no meetings, just the wind in the trees and the faint sound of Cedar Crest's perfect world unraveling down the hill. Within 10 days of the judgment, the Cedar Crest HOA board announced formal dissolution. Their emergency meeting, leaked online, sounded like a hostage negotiation. The board members looked like people being told their yacht club was being converted into a soup kitchen. Some begged to restructure rather than disband, but the city had already pulled their charter. HOA privileges revoked, assets frozen, grant accounts under federal audit. It was over. Karen's house hit the foreclosure listings the next month. Irony's a hell of a thing. Her white Mazda got booted on her own former street. One neighbor filmed the moment and uploaded it with the caption, "No drones, no mercy." It went mildly viral, and Gordon Whitaker, he vanished from public life like a disgraced magician. Last I heard, he was living in his sister's garage in Klamath Falls, working remotely for some compliance firm out of state. Poetic enough. The part that caught me off guard wasn't the money, it was the letters. They started trickling in slowly. A handwritten note from an elderly woman on Maple Hollow Drive who said she'd been fined $1,200 for unauthorized flower arrangements. A single mom whose daughter was cited for recreational chalk vandalism. A war vet who got warned 3 times for flying the American flag from a wooden post that wasn't board approved. They thanked me. Some mailed cookies. One sent a rock with freedom painted on it. I kept it on my porch rail. Paul became something of a local legend. Newspapers called him the whistleblower in khakis. He hated it, but he kept showing up to every town hall meeting, now as a voice for what happens when systems go unchecked. Me? I finally got to finish the damn house. With the money from the settlement, I brought in a crew I trusted. Roof, plumbing, reclaimed wood for the porch. No more hiding tools or worrying about sabotage. I even restored the wrought iron gate at the edge of the drive. The one Karen had once claimed was an eyesore to community character. It gleamed like defiance. The local historic commission came out and reevaluated the property. After a detailed walkthrough and paperwork shuffle, I got the letter. Protected status granted. No one, not HOA, not city inspectors, not nosy Karens, could legally modify, interfere with, or even suggest changes to the structure without my written approval. I framed that letter, but the best part, I had a metal sign custom made. Bold letters, brushed steel. I mounted it right at the top of the driveway. This is private property. No drones, no HOA, no excuses. Trespassing will result in prosecution and humiliation. A few tourists even stopped to take pictures with it. And then, on a strange poetic morning about a month later, I saw it. The white Mazda, or what was left of it, parked on the side of the county road, windows smashed, weeds growing up the tires, its registration long expired, abandoned. like a warning from a past that had finally run out of road. I didn't call a tow truck. I let it rot. The morning the last scaffolding came down, the sun finally broke through in full. No rain, no fog. Just golden light pouring over the hills like honey, catching the fresh copper gutters and dancing along the now solid roofline. The house stood proud. After months of siege, after threats, sabotage, and courtrooms, it was finally mine in every way that mattered. There was peace, not silence, not stillness. Those don't really exist on a working property, but there was peace in the rhythm. The sound of hammers in the morning, gravel crunching under work boots, music drifting from the barn where I set up my workshop. These weren't distractions anymore. They were the soundtrack of recovery. I still get visitors. Journalists sometimes, nosy bloggers now and then, and once even a group of architecture students who asked if they could document the restoration for a thesis on historic preservation and legal resilience. That last one made me laugh harder than I had in months. I let them sketch the porch and photograph the beams. Hell, they earned it just for calling my house resilient. Paul drops by too. He brings local gossip and sometimes pie. He's fully retired now, but you can tell he still itches to organize things. He tried to convince the town council to launch a public transparency board. They shot him down, of course. But now he's working with 2 younger council members to build something better, something permanent. We joked once that he's building the anti-HOA, a watchdog for watchdogs. As for Ray, well, he's busier than ever. Apparently, exposing fraud is good for business. His name's been whispered in 3 other neighborhood disputes since mine. He says he's thinking of writing a book. I told him to call it Drone Wars, My Life in Suburban Espionage. He didn't laugh, but I think that just means he's seriously considering it. And Karen, last I heard, she's 4 months into her sentence at Coffee Creek Correctional. Minimum security, but still prison. I imagine she doesn't get to boss anyone around in there. Maybe she started an inmate newsletter titled Community Harmony Behind Bars. Whitaker got community service in addition to his sentence. Oddly poetic. He's been assigned to assist with city record-keeping under supervision, paper cuts, and public shame. Their names still come up now and then. People want to know how someone like her got so much control, how no one stopped her sooner, how deep the rot really went. But those are bigger questions, and I've learned not every story needs an ending tied up in a bow. The truth is, people don't like conflict until it knocks on their door. Then they scramble. Then they remember. That's what keeps me sharp, keeps me watching. I added a second camera system to the ridge above the driveway, not because I'm paranoid, but because vigilance is like a muscle. It atrophies if you stop using it. The system's solar-powered, motion-triggered, and linked to my phone now that I finally have decent reception. Funny thing, the moment you stop hiding, the right kind of protection becomes easy. One afternoon, I found a kid on a bike gawking at the metal sign on my gate. I came down expecting to scare him off, but he just asked, "Did that really happen? Like the drone thing?" I told him, "Yeah, the drone, the court, the sabotage, all of it." He looked at the house, then back at me. "Cool," he said. "It's like a movie." "Wasn't fun living it," I replied. "But you won." I paused, then nodded. "Yeah, I did." He biked away, probably off to play video games or tell his friends a half-made-up version of what he saw. But I stood there longer, watching the road, watching the wind in the trees, thinking about that word, win. Because what I really got wasn't just a verdict or a settlement. It wasn't the sign or the money or the headlines. It was freedom. The right to live without a microscope overhead, without being painted as the villain in someone else's fantasy of control. The right to exist without apology on land I worked for, bled for, rebuilt from the ground up. Some days I walk through the house and still half expect something to go wrong. A drone buzzing, a car idling at the end of the road, but they don't come anymore. And if they ever did, I'm not the man I was when this started. The walls of this house aren't just wood and nails. They're testimony. They're evidence that you can win, that standing your ground literally can mean something. On the back deck, I had a quote carved into the railing, just small enough that only someone who stands in the right light can read it. This house does not bend to shadows. It's not a threat. It's a reminder.